25 years ago, dot-com startups tried to disrupt the automotive industry by offering car sales online. Big money launches such as Auto-by-Tel bypassed traditional dealer networks and sold directly to the customer with a promise of simplicity and low prices. They did not succeed, and since then it has been largely business as usual for the car industry, which has used digital as a way to attract and inform customers, but seldom to transact. The received wisdom was that car buyers were uncomfortable making the leap to online purchase, and that this would always protect manufacturers and dealers. In recent years, however, this view has been challenged. Marketeers began to recognize that the customer, encouraged by the sophisticated online experiences served by the brands such as Amazon and Google, were ready to go the extra step. The internet continues to grow exponentially. Currently an amazing 4 billion pages, and is the unquestioned go-to source for information on any subject. Nearly everyone is online with access unconstrained by place or time. People love the 24/7 convenience and the near instantaneous fulfillment of their needs, both material and emotional. The industry has also been forced to respond to the threat from a new wave of disruptors, including aggregators who put everything in one place for the customer in an optimized and very convenient way. Click-to-buy functionality is now commonplace on car websites, although many within the industry still seem unsure of the returns building complex digital platforms will deliver. With the growth of affordable monthly payment schemes, the ever-improving quality of the vehicles on offer, and the long warranties, many customers don't even take a test drive before buying, instead using virtual showroom technology to sample the product. Sophus3 provides this service to 16 car brands across the big 5 European markets. Customers are making the decision quickly too. Although the research journey can start many weeks before a customer becomes active, the typical time between the first visit to a car brand site and final decision is incredibly short. The one remaining barrier for many car brands is around pricing. The traditional franchise dealer networks mean that the customer might be quoted quite different prices for the same car depending on incentives different dealers might offer. The move by many brands to an agency model in which prices are fixed centrally by the manufacturer is a necessary step to ensure consistent pricing that assures the online buyer that they're getting the best deal available. As we know, the pandemic has forced car brands and their dealers to revisit each step within the complex car buying journey to make sure it could be taken virtually using digital tools. This has meant adding bits that were missing and joining up the whole into a transactional experience that was as seamless as possible. In our view, the response of the industry has been impressive, but there is still much to learn. Which brings us to our interviewee, Delu Jackson, who spent many years in the car industry as a digital and strategic marketing leader for brands such as Audi and Nissan. But he then took an unusual step for someone in our sector, moving to other major verticals, including senior marketing roles at McDonald's and Kellogg's. Delu is an automotive expert who is now on the outside looking in, and we asked him to reflect on where car brands should focus in order to become truly e-commerce ready.
They did, right? And again, think of things that had less physical requirements, like entertainment, like content and information. Even some of the products that could go through e-commerce, small, light delivery systems through home delivery or home shipment, those systems were already in place. What we saw was an expansion of things like home delivery and home delivery services, where some of the larger physical items that you would have picked up in a store needed to be delivered. So it shifted the size, shape, and scale of what was delivered or shipped to home. So we did see some of those shifts. But as you mentioned, vehicles were very different because that was an external acquisition model, right? I could do all my homework, but I still had to go to the location myself to have it delivered. We did see shifts in that too, right? Where they would deliver it to home, service pickups. But a lot of those services were not only limited, they were actually canceled during that period, right? And so the business didn't shift, it somewhat contracted for a period, where others expanded. Again, I'm in the food space. The eat at home food expanded versus what people have done out of home. So we saw a massive change in that behavior. So that would suggest that some of the mechanisms were not in place. Now, and that's at scale, because we do have instances where it was taken care of, right? I went through it during the process. I had no problems. My experience was just dramatically different. I had to do it all online. I had to depend on someone else coming to pick up my car for service, right? Which actually was great, by the way, versus, the difference is as we learn that those things and those mechanisms can be supported and they work, my surprise is that as things change, we go back to the old versus progressing with what we learned to be positive. That's what I think still surprises me, right? People say, we'll go back. Now that we're open, let's go back. I'm like, well, this was better. Let's stay with that. Most of the experiences we have built are about what's most efficient and effective for the company, not for the consumer, as we just described. And I think we shared when I moved industries, when I left the industry, someone asked me, was it difficult to relearn the consumer in this different space? And I said, it's the same consumer, right? That's the interesting thing. It's the same consumer. So the same consumers for any of the auto brands I worked for, or the same consumer for any of the food brands, or when I worked at McDonald's. Because I said, we put big cup holders in Nissans because they bought big cups at McDonald's. It's the same consumer. Remember, we talk about this in a consumer-centric world in auto. We study the 23 hours they're not in the car to understand what we want to put in the car, how the car should travel, how big it should be, how wide it can be, how tall it can be, because we're looking at what we used to call them ethnographies to understand their life experiences and how the car fit into it. If we thought about how the car buying process fit into that experience the same way, imagine what we would create. It probably wouldn't look like what it is today. What I see is the opportunity. One, I think automotive has so much influence on the overall consumer experience as I just described. The types of cars, the way people travel and their travel patterns define what they buy. When I was at McDonald's, that defines, how many drive-thrus you have and which location and where the restaurants should be in terms of travel patterns, right? So automotive and mobility has a big part to play in all of that. And if they really understood and continue to watch the consumer behavior, they might find new and interesting ways to enhance that experience. That all of that, again, the other 23 hours is really what defines and also creates the constraints on what they can commit to the auto buying experience, right? Versus thinking, they don't want to come in and they just want to do everything online, right? I've heard that a lot. And we need to get them in the store. We've got to get them in here because that's our opportunity or that's our advantage. Versus saying, what if we turned it on our head and said, what if we created an optimal buying experience that worked great for us and them, that didn't require them to make time that they don't have, right? That's the difference between the way some of the other companies have thought about the consumers. We call it the jobs to be done or the struggles. How do we identify what their struggles are and remove those barriers and become the solution for those struggles? And if we did that, I have to think that, actually, I won't have to think. I know the experience that we would create would be dramatically different. Again, look at the historical data. What I did is, as I got closer and closer to the data in the food space, I went back and applied that same thing to the automotive space. And I said it follows a similar trend. We have a fixed number. That number doesn't move. The industry hasn't expanded. The total number of people buying during the period hasn't expanded. It has a normalization, right? The data just sort of stays where it is between those variables. If that's the case, that's all it can ever be is share shifting. Yet if you add up everyone's aspirational growth, it exceeds the potential of any given period. Remember, we got into this where we had all of that excess capacity for all those years and all of that because everybody built to potential versus actual. The data's there. Literally the data's there. The facts are there. And we haven't strayed from that mean in the history that I've been paying attention to the industry, 30 years, right? So 25 years, it hasn't changed. Yet we still operate as if it is. So to tie that back to why that matters is we probably build unreasonable expectations of what conversion rates, what hit rates, and what people should actually do because it all fits within a very measurable pool of potential. somewhere between 11 and 17 million. And that's the total pool of potential. And if everyone expects to outperform that, it would be inconsistent with the actual consumer behavior, right? There's only so many people who are in market, and there's only so many people who can afford to be in market. And no matter how much we desire for that to change, the financial system and the capability of those same humans doesn't change at the rate that we wanted the business to expand. Now, what that would do is teach us to be more targeted and more specific about who we're talking to, when we're talking to them, and what we expect to happen when we do that, right? Does that make sense? That's super important. But if you don't have a foundational understanding of what your true audience is, then it leads to a lot of activity that can't have a return. We have factors like we talk about lead times and we have to plan so far ahead. And that's where you think about the experience. Now you talk about experiences that are important, right? In the rest of the world, we're getting the personalization, fast retail, food personalization, and diet specific behaviors that you can order on demand, right? Food delivery services. If the consumer's doing that 23 hours a day, and then they step into this world and say, I have to plan 9 months ahead and I have to take what they have. You know, a lot of the more advanced brands are putting more personalization options, right? Modular components or order only versus going to static inventory. Because right, we say static inventory, they'll buy what I have. Now people are moving to, I'm gonna order what I want and I'll wait, right? So how do we start? Those are parts of the experience that we have to get back to, but still there are parts of our model, and the business model is built on scale and productivity, right? It's a lot of widgets at the same time, shipped at the same time to the same place. That's not how the rest of the world's working. It's on-demand delivery, e-commerce space. And guess who's defining that? Not this industry. It's Amazon. It's Walmart. It's because they do that all the time frequently, and they go on and say, I find my thing, I ask the question, I get a review, and then if I need to customize it, I can. The restaurants, so think about all those parts of their experience. Then they bump into this and say, whoa, I'm locked into a fixed asset. What is the consumer trying to accomplish in that situation? And can we make that easier, frictionless, and as painless as possible? And the key is, what can we do to minimize that friction? That's when they give us credit for making the experience special, repeatable, or something they want to do again, right? And that's what we do. And we watch each of those touch points and literally try to mitigate them. And in some cases, you know what? You mentioned sometimes you have to find someone else to resolve it. Sometimes it's really something we create ourselves. So how do we remove it? And so we focus a lot on that. Even things like packaging, right? We make it easy to open that package and get to the product and get it prepared. So we design all of that into the experience, to your point. And we think about how if convenience is the core of what you want to deliver, is it truly convenient? That includes access, that includes getting the information, that includes preparation, even disposal in some cases. So we think through all those touch points to deliver on that. And I think Otto has an amazing spot in our ecosystem to do many of those things. And I'm excited to see who's going to crack it. Essentially, what we're trying to do is create a solution based on a demand signal, right? We've identified in the marketplace, there's either a gap or an opportunity or a struggle that needs to be solved. Therefore, we made this product to do that, right? So then we say, great, how many, as I say, go back to that population. We should know how many people should be interested in that product based on historical forecasting or the size of the opportunity. We kind of say we do that, but I'm not sure we do it as precisely as we could, right? It always exceeds the actual potential. But if you get that generally right from a forecasting perspective, it then would simplify what you would want to do from an experience perspective. Great, let's say, I think 1 million people would generally want to buy that product. Great, I'm gonna probably have to expose it. This is the definition of what those million people should look like. Then you can say, well, go find those million people. And instead of having to find the entire population and hope 0.1 actually become the million, we could probably go find 10 million that were more likely that those solutions relevant for them, communicate to them, And then what you need to communicate to them becomes a lot simpler because you understand their struggles, their jobs, their motivations, and then you just market to that, which simplifies your cost base, which simplifies the production base, which simplifies the scale of what you produce so there's less waste, right? And there's less need for distress relief and all those things. Does it make sense? So it comes back to starting with the consumer-centric demand, which sizes the opportunity, which sizes the support required to achieve that opportunity. Where I think it's still been a little bit, our KPIs are like, let's talk to everybody and hope they convert. But when you talk to everybody and only a few million convert in any period, it's always going to be a small number, which then we think it's inefficient and ineffective. No, it's just what it is. Seen how like the total percentage of sales of any given business, they're like in the 2-3% range, right? When you look at share, but they advertise as if they're their entire market. You ever notice that? Like I was there, we did it all the time. It was like, just go big and we'll get a small output. And I think the world's turned on its head and said, you don't have to go big to get the right output. So how do you start to figure out what the really, because we have so much data available and consumers are literally saying, me, I need this, versus us saying, no, I know what you need. I'll give it to you. And they say, no, I didn't want that. So I think there's this great opportunity. And this is just in the last 10 years, we have more data than we ever could have thought about 10 years ago. Right. And I just think we have to rethink how we use it to truly understand the consumer from that data. It's not data for the sake of data. It's consumer behavior masked as data. And that's a really important transition. This is true of any industry, any country, any company. It's all about the people. It's about creating a mental model that says, what I did yesterday should not be an inhibitor to what I need to do today and what I might need to do tomorrow. And that seems philosophical or maybe a little esoteric, but it's so true that, we have a lived experience and a lot of our business decisions are based on that lived experience. But we're learning so much more at such a rapid pace now. We have to be okay saying, I didn't know that yesterday, so I need to do this tomorrow. And I've found in a lot of companies that takes a lot of effort to get people comfortable with that. But more importantly, to start building performance metrics and cultures that encourage it, right? You hear about fail fast cultures and try and test and learn and all of that stuff. That's less prevalent than people talk about, right? But that's to me, so digital transformation is not about the technology, it's about the people and culture. And then lastly, I think in what that people and culture will ultimately create, if you get it right, that's about how we get things done, right? How does the work get done? And many of the cultures are inconsistent with how work gets done in the digital era. Like these Zooms and these interactions and these texts and a lot of people being remote, and the way we communicate through mobile and all these things. The way we get things done is so different than how we used to do it today. Big conferences, big meetings, big workshops, draw everything on the board, touch and feel. That's all being virtualized, back to how we started this conversation. And that's a culture shift, that's a mental shift, that's a people shift. And that's the biggest inhibitor to digital transformation. I don't think it's binary, right? I think go back to what's the job and the struggle. And it's different for some folks, right? And I think what happens is we tend to focus on 2 or 3% of the population and not look at that total population that kind of operates on a spectrum there, right? Some are way over here and some are way over here. And we're trying to figure out the one solution that works for everybody. And what we have is one solution that works for some people, but it doesn't work for a lot of other people. And so I think it's really trying to figure out how that system has enough flex in it, as you said, to not matter. It's been differentiated for some of those brands, right? Because it's different than the others. So for the people who are interested in that, that's working for them. That may scale, it may become the norm. The question is, can everyone follow the consumer as those norms change? And right, that's the whole challenge of obsolescence, right? If we have to go more direct, a lot of people are dabbling with it and saying, I'm going to try it. And then they see a little bit of success. Let's see if there creates enough critical mass that becomes the norm, then it'll become the norm. We're seeing it in so many other ways a consumer operates. Will it become their expectation, and when, right? And that's going to define it, right? And that's going to define the winners in any of those circumstances. And I don't know, my crystal ball doesn't tell me when that tipping point is going to happen, but we're seeing a lot of momentum going that direction. Not just in this industry and related to these products, but in everything else they're doing. So that would suggest to me it'll become an expectation. We all know it. We're time constrained. We expect everything to go faster. We expect the information to be available. Hey, I already entered this. I don't want to enter it again. I don't want to have to show up if I already told you what I needed, right? I don't want a sales pitch after I've already told you what I needed, right? So all those things are going to sometimes be, and on the flip side, sometimes that experience is amazing. I'd love to learn things I didn't know, or I don't understand completely how this works, and I need a little bit of help. We're going to have the flexibility to bring resources to bear against that circumstance at the individual level. We're trying to be responsive to the marketplace. It's not that we don't know, it's that we don't control what happens. So how do we set ourselves up to be more responsive to what's happening, right? The last 18 months taught us anything is we had no way to anticipate that. We had no way to think about what we had to do, but we demonstrated an amazing amount of adaptability. What we need to do is say, when we learn from all that adaptability, some people say we had to overextend ourselves or do things that were extraordinary, but it proved that we could. What if we could retain and maintain some of those things that were extraordinary and make them ordinary? That's what transformation looks like. That's what evolution and revolution look like in transforming things. So what I'd love to see is more people hang on to the things we learned that we did well and not go backwards, but say, let's go forward better.